A very clear result on a sizable enough turnout, so the people have spoken.
Yes, it was a good turnout, and I have to respect that decision. As I was saying when I met the press, I mean, one cannot rush to judgment. We don't have a quick fix here. I said during the campaign that if we voted yes, we had a clear pathway in terms of ratification of this treaty, which was agreed with 26 others, and proceeding with reforms within the Union. A no vote means we're heading into uncharted territory. We don't have a clear pathway forward.
We'll come to that in a moment. Why do you think people voted no? What were the key reasons that the treaty was defeated?
Well, I think there are a myriad of reasons, and it will have to be analysed and reflected upon and looked at. I mean, as I was saying, there was people who had some genuine concerns about the treaty itself, perhaps, but there was also a lot of extraneous issues brought into the play, and there were a lot of disparate groups, some of would have contradictory positions on what sort of a treaty they'd like themselves, but found themselves all on the one side.
But Declan Gandy, who was talking to you earlier, was making the point that what unites them all is a belief that something was being imposed on them, that Brussels is distant, it doesn't listen, it isn't amenable to democratic accountability, and that was what was at the heart of most of that no vote, even if there were other reasons above the line, as it were.
Well, a lot of people can give opinions, but I think it is true to say that this treaty did set out and make a very solid attempt, in my view, as a result of a very more open and participative process prior to getting into political discussions at government level, to try and confer rights at the various levels that were appropriate in terms of what should be done at the European level, the monetary union, the customs union, what should be done at local level. And obviously there was that effort made in this treaty to do that. Which makes its defeat
all the more striking.
Well, obviously, you know, I think there's a whole lot of reasons for this defeat, which I have to sort of reflect on myself, but it's not just in relation to that. But if people were trying to talk about how do we make the Union more relevant to our concerns and day-to-day lives, I think this treaty was the best way of doing it.
But we also had people voting no, despite the fact that the entire political establishment lined up to urge a yes vote. We had all the main organisations, the farmers, business organisations, most of the trade unions, all urging a no, and yet people saying no, we're not going to buy it.
Yeah, well, people weren't voting for parties, they were voting on this issue. And there was a lot of confusion around the issue. I suggested it was orchestrated in the main, but I don't want to go over the campaign or in any way take away from the fact that the people have spoken on this issue now. I think that there's no question in my mind but that we are, as I've said, in uncharted territory. I have to deal with the responsibility now of the aftermath of this.
But you sought to give leadership. You said that as Taoiseach, I'm urging you in the vital national interest to vote yes, and you got your answer today.
Yes, and I'm disappointed about that, deeply disappointed, and I take the responsibility, having led the yes campaign, that goes with that position. I mean, I don't walk away from that.
So what does that tell us about Brian Cowen's political credibility then with the Irish people?
Well, what it tells us is that I have not succeeded in this case to win over a sufficient majority of people who went out to vote last
on a matter of, in your own words, vital national interest.
Yes, it was, and it is, in my opinion. But we've had the decision now, Brian. You know, I have to deal with the aftermath of this. I've spoken to some leaders today. We have a meeting next week. And the fact of the matter is government now has to deal with the aftermath and try and see in what way we can proceed.
What do you think when you hear President Barroso, Vice President Margot Wallström all saying the ratification process will go ahead, the remaining countries will be allowed to come to their judgment in relation to this treaty, even though we know now that because Ireland has voted no, the treaty surely is dead?
Well, I think, you know, you have to recognise that every country collectively made a commitment through their own particular national processes to proceed with ratification of this treaty. And it's a matter for those governments and those nations to proceed if they wish. I mean, we have to respect that process and the way our own has to be considered. So, I mean,
it's a kind of a pointless exercise, is it not?
Well, I mean, the point is, you know, we are in a position, as I've said to you, where we are in uncharted territories. There has to be a political discussion around where we go from here. I mean, the European Union still has the same challenges to face with the emergence of China and India and all the rest of it, and how we have a more efficient and effective union is a critical issue for citizens.
What people hear is they hear the message from Brussels, it's full steam ahead, even though the Irish people have very clearly said, no, this treaty is not for us, we're not giving it our assent, and under the rules of the European Union, that should mean that's an end to it.
Well, in fairness to the people who have invested so much into this process as well, they wish to discuss that. They are affected by this decision. It's not just an internal Irish decision. Everyone is affected by this. So quite clearly the first part of any process of dialogue has to be, I have to go and discuss it with them, reflect faithfully the issues that I believe brought about this situation, and listen to what their views are as to where we go from here.
So, are you going in there looking to renegotiate Lisbon?
Only the point I'm making is I'm first of all going to have to reflect on what it is that's happened in the last 24 hours. I've said we're heading into uncharted territory. The first part of the process is to discuss with those heads of state and government who are equally affected by our decision and to take it from there.
Will your message next week when you meet your European counterparts be that Lisbon is dead? It's gone.
Well, I mean, I'm not in the business of dealing with that issue on their behalf. I have to discuss it with them. And, you know, I don't have an answer to the question, what happens next? We don't have that answer. That's the point. And that's the uncertainty that is now created.
But we know it has to be something other than Lisbon, do we not?
Well, we have to decide, can we find a basis for a consensus going forward? This was a hard-won consensus over 7 years of governments working together. And I have now to report that in relation to this country, we will not be ratifying this treaty on the basis of this decision, because we're changing our constitution. Under our constitutional rules, you have to have a referendum for that. We've had the decision today, the outcome. I've now to go and report that to my colleagues, and they have to see what they can do.
We all know what happened in the case of the Nice Treaty, rejected by the Irish people on a much smaller turnout, it should be said, and then the people were given a second chance to vote on what was basically the same treaty. Are you ruling that out now at this stage?
I'm not rushing to judgment at all on that, with respect. I mean, I can't rush to judgment on any of that. I have to discuss this issue. We just have an outcome here where we have a very uncertain future going forward. Colleagues in other countries are equally affected by this.
So could the treaty be put once again to the Irish people, put to them a second time?
Well, I'm not prepared even to surmise on any of that with respect. I have to now report what's just happened here, and I have to talk to colleagues about it. And I'm not rushing to judgment or saying anything beyond that.
You're saying tonight that you're certainly not ruling out a second Lisbon referendum.
I'm not ruling anything in or out or up or down. I simply have had to deal with the fact that today we've had a decision officially announced within the last hour or two that this treaty was not being ratified in our referendum, and I now have to go and see what the political issues that arise for colleagues and for ourselves are in that, and to analyse it carefully.
Taoiseach Brian Cowen, thanks for talking to us.
Thanks.
Well, not surprisingly, Ireland's referendum result is big news in the rest of Europe. Media outlets from all over the EU are in Dublin. Our reporter Gareth O'Connor has been following their reporters.